Hey everyone, welcome back to Trekyards. I'm Captain Foley.
And I'm Simon Cockings.
Today we bring you a very unique ship from Star Trek, the SS Botany Bay from the TOS episode Space Seed. This is, of course, the ship which the Enterprise discovered, which held Khan and his genetically enhanced supermen in cryostasis, also known as the DY-100 class. Now, I bet you're asking yourself, why isn't this a one-hit wonders episode?
Stuart,
Yes.
why is this not a one-hit wonder episode?
I am glad you asked. Well, this ship is such a fan favorite, and we discovered so much info about it that it's definitely worthy of a full Trekyards episode. So let's begin.
Okay, straight on to the facts. You might not know, guys, and I learned a lot while doing this episode. There are a few slight variations of the actual size of this vessel due to different versions operating on the same time, but it's generally believed to have a length of 100 metres, width of 32 metres, and a height of around 48 metres. But again, some of these things are missing because of the Third World War. Sorry, everyone. But some of these numbers are also guesstimates based on conflicting information provided. Typical cruising speed was around 55,000 km/hr with a max velocity of 80,000 km/hr.
That's kilometers an hour, Samuel.
Thanks, Stuart. So normally we talk about scale, and we have obviously the shots from Space Seed, which see it, in comparison to TOS Enterprise, but with a length of 100 metres, it's roughly the same size as an Enterprise Zero bird of prey, 115 metres, or the Defiant, 122 metres, so pretty small.
Wow. Well, as Samuel just said, 20th century authoritative data on the early DY-100 class is sparse and fragmentary at best, due in large part to the eugenic wars of the 1990s.
Oh, they were a horrible time, weren't they, Stuart? I mean,
know, it was rough, I'm telling you.
It was rough.
And then the Third World War of the early 24th century, so spoilers, guys, something to look forward to, which destroyed much of the information. While many of these ships were in fact retrofitted and modified over the last century, some in fact do remain in service as supply ships and freighters, many of these automated in the TOS era. However, among these, a varying number of sizes do exist, as well as different configurations, some even capable of low warp speed travel.
That's cool. So, initially designed in the early 1990s, obviously we all remember the great DY-100 launches, to be a short-range cargo and transport ship, shuttling supplies back and forth from the Moon, eventually to Mars, and other human-based settlements within our solar system, and of course further when warp comes around. It was of course considered cutting-edge technology from the 1990s. I mean, all those blinky buttons, so cutting-edge, and was a major stepping stone for man's exploration into space. Some were eventually outfitted, as I said, for long-range interplanetary travel, and they included artificial gravity and standard cargo modules converted into cryostasis containers for extended deep space trips.
Yeah, the propulsion was supplied by three Nerva 3 nuclear thermal rocket motors built by Westinghouse Aerospace.
Obviously.
Yes, obviously.
Best around.
The reactor that powered these was started up once upon achieving orbit. Then after acceleration was completed, the reactor was then allowed to cool down to regular levels, providing power for all the ship's systems. Solar panels at the rear of the ship also supplied a constant supply of auxiliary energy, which supplemented the main reactor, providing the ship was near a sun.
So there are multiple types of the spaceship, with modifications to the design. As mentioned earlier, the DY-100A, or Liberty class, was heavily used in the early years as well. Both the standard DY-100 and modified DY-100A came about as a result of Project Plowshare, which used old decommissioned military hardware for non-military use. In this case, using the old decommissioned submarines, such as the Seawolf class, and these were stripped of all the seagoing equipment and refitted for zero-G operation. So good reuse there, guys. Well done, future us.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, you already know that they were airtight, and the conversion from subsurface to spacecraft would take relatively little effort, I would think. These ships were then modified for spacefaring duty and launched into orbit using the SRB booster packs, much like the shuttle uses, with an Earth escape velocity of 38,000 kilometers an hour. Once in orbit, they would rendezvous at Space Station 5's maintenance and repair facility, where final system installations and testing was completed, and then the ship was then commissioned and put into service.
So one great thing about this ship is it's very flexible in terms of cargo it can have, as it has up to 60 tri-lock cargo containers that can be attached at one time, and these are obviously between the habitation and propulsion modules.
Yeah, and the freighter duty was its main mission, of course. However, it could be adapted and reconfigured for other mission types as well. The standard cargo modules were adapted into cryo-sleep units for long-term interstellar exploration and possible colonization. A standard mission from the Earth to the Moon took about 9.2 hours. However, in the uprated mode with the cryostasis tubes, A trip to Mars took 937 days for colonization, so definitely needed for those cryo containers.
So a crew of 85 individuals could be placed into suspended animation at one time, and this was of course necessary for long space flights until about 2018, as it would take years to travel from planet to planet within our solar system, or of course further.
So production of the DY-100 classes of ships began before 1996 and ended sometime around the year 2000. As mentioned, already a few classes were designed, such as the DY-100, DY-100A, as well as a few other variants, and eventually some of these DY-100s were actually updated and used as late as the motion picture era, still carrying the DY-100 classification.
But as we all know, Stuart, there's no bloody A, B, C, or D. We always love the classic, so D100 all the way.
There's only the DY-100.
Yes.
However, sometime around 2019 to 2055, a large number of the DY-100s and 100As were modified and changed into a class known as the DY-500.
Cool. So significant improvements in sublight technology led to the DY-100 projects being abandoned, but pre-existing designs did obviously still stay in service, as they were quite tough little ships, not as tough as the Defiant, but yeah, and perfectly good at transporting goods. In fact, in the TOS episode, The Ultimate Computer, in the original 1960s release anyway, you actually see a DY-100 as a Federation freighter, which shows that some of these did survive and remain in service all the way until the 23rd century. However, in the 2006 remastered version of the Ultimate Computer, the ship was changed to an Antares-class freighter for production reasons, so take it or leave it.
Some of the DY-500 class ships were in fact modified and relaunched between the years of 2123 and 2190 with a similar design philosophy and configuration. Now, the NX-01, just for reference, was launched at 2151 with the Warp 5 engine, so this makes perfect sense. The new variant was equipped with the new Yoyodyne pulse fusion warp drives, and these ships could actually reach warp, but were limited to the warp 2 barrier.
Still pretty fast.
This proved much more useful and had better operating costs due to efficiency than the older DY-100s and DY-500 sublight models, and were primarily used for early colonization. However, fewer of these were made, as this type of space frame was almost a century old by this time, and were quickly dropped in favor of newer and more efficient designs shortly after their inception.
So the DY-500 was designed by no one other than Rex Sternbach, and was first seen in the 1979 reference book Star Trek Spaceflight Chronology. As we just mentioned, these were originally upgraded DY-100 vessels done around 2019 to 2055, and were powered by advanced fusion reactors, or fission, because, you know, they're different fission reactors, and used as freighters and cargo ships before eventually upgraded almost a century later, so they served, again, a long time.
So let's talk about the actual Botany Bay now. It was, of course, named after the first penal colony on the shores of Australia, which is quite a fitting name considering its cargo of criminals. There is conflicting information on its official launch date, however, seeing as how the actual date and its cargo were classified as top secret and not even made public knowledge until the late 23rd century. 3 dates were suspected of being the actual launch date, those being January 5th, 1996, January 11th, 1996, or September 17th, 1996.
Yeah, and because of the actual government cover-up, some speculate by the mysterious figure known as Gary 7, we'll get into that later, regarding this launch date. It was in fact considered many speculation and even a myth in the 22nd century. Because, I mean, how does the great leader Khan just escape and leave and whatever? So, serious speculation. And obviously this ship was discovered later on by the Enterprise, US Enterprise by Kirk, in the year 2276, which is 271 years after it launched. Wow. And it was discovered around 20 light years away from Earth, in a sector controlled by Starbase 12.
Now, there is speculation that the Botany Bay had reverse-engineered alien tech added to supplement its systems. And apparently the mysterious alien known as Gary 7 and his assistant, Roberto Lincoln, had in fact convinced Khan to allow himself and his followers to be placed in suspended animation and exiled to another planet as their military campaign was floundering and defeat was imminent. Instead of allowing the Russian and American task forces to destroy them, Khan saw hope for his future in Gary 7's promise of a future on a distant world.
So the planet that Gary 7 had promised Khan was about 100 light years away from Earth, and with this Botany Bay's new supplemented alien engines, the craft would slowly accelerate until it was about 1/10 the speed of light for its long journey. However, the primitive star-lock navigation had errors, it's fair to say, along the route and failed, resulting in the craft veering off course and eventually becoming lost and tumbling endlessly through space until Stardate 3141.9, when it was eventually discovered, like we said, by the Enterprise, and the rest, as they say, is future history.
So now it's time to move on to some trivia. The DY-100 was designed by Matt Jeffries, who designed many of the TOS ships, including the Constitution class, the D7, and many more.
The original Space Seed script called the ship the C2-100 class. However, why this was changed we don't know, but I think, come on, not as good a ring to it. DY-100, C2-100. Yeah, we know who the winner is.
C2-100 sounds like a Star Wars droid.
It does.
The studio model measured 43 by 18 inches and was mostly constructed out of wood and embellished with miscellaneous model parts and metal components.
So the model had a brown-red hue, but due to the studio lights and filming conditions and use of the blue screen, the on-screen ship actually looked very grey because of the blue screen, a common problem in blue screening.
Jeffries himself did not build the model, but it was built using his hand-drawn sketches. He did, in fact, weather the model and give it that used look.
Which I think is one of the best parts out of everything. That used feel works really well.
It was only shot once at the Film Effects of Hollywood Studio, and the footage seen in the original Ultimate Computer episode was stock footage from that shoot.
So obviously for the 2006 remastered version of Space Seed, a CGI model was used. But these animators had their work cut out for them because the original CGI model, which was done by Petri Bloomquist, was done in Lightwave 3D, but these guys were working in Autodesk Maya. And in this conversion between the two formats, it lost a lot of data and quite a lot of details. That's a shame. And they also had to cut down render times because they had so much more remastering shots to do. So the final resolution for these shots are actually a lot less than they would have ideally had. So poor Botany Bay.
And Samuel, you know all about rendering times and stuff and higher resolutions, so you can relate to that.
I can. Poor guys. Poor me. Poor Trekyards.
The new remastered CGI Botany Bay now has a tiny circular docking port, similar to those used on the real International Space Station, thanks to Michael Okuda. Previously, in 2003, Doug Drexler had already built a CGI model of the DY-100 for the fan series Star Trek New Voyages. This was later used in Star Trek Ships of the Line calendar and book derivatives.
That's cool. So let's move on to discussion, guys. Yeah, I like the design. It's very rustic. It's something that does certainly feel like a submarine in space. But the evolution, taking the design, aesthetic, and put it into space. I think it's something that we could design, and it certainly says something about a design that it could still be used so many years later. Good job, guys. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. I can certainly imagine a shot above Earth, with the retrofitted ones, of course, with a dreadnought flying above and these ships flying past it and going to a starbase. It'd look awesome. So in the Eugenics War novels, we learn about Khan's rise to power, his departure, and in To Reign in Hell, his exile on SETI Alpha 5. So in these we learn that Gary 7 from the TOS season finale, Assignment Earth, was a major part of these events. You should definitely check them out, guys. A very cool crossover.
I like the fact that the old decommissioned subs were refitted for this purpose. Makes for a really neat looking ship. Plus it makes a load of sense. I mean, you already know the hull is airtight and that it can handle large pressure changes. But it does make you wonder if the actual way a sub is designed and built could handle the reverse pressure of air inside pushing out, as would happen in space. So I don't know if that would pose a problem or not, design-wise, but... As for the early freighter and passenger transport idea, I think it is very cool and completely reasonable, especially with the way you can add and reconfigure the cargo pods.
Yeah.
I like the progression from Earth-based, to just starting to colonize our solar system, and to use a ship that was once only Earthbound is very interesting. Also, the fact that these continue to be in service well into Kirk's time is very cool. Especially some of the modifications I've seen with added warp engines and deflector dishes. It's a really neat progression. Plus, there are a fair number in Doug Drexler's Ships of the Line book, seen right alongside starbases and Constitution-class ships. Plus, the bit about Gary 7 and tying that into the historical ship is cool. I don't know if you guys knew this, but in the TOS episode Assignment Earth, where we first meet Gary 7 and Roberta Lincoln, that was actually a pilot for a show they were going to develop based around their adventures, and them ensuring that humanity was kind of on the right track. So they would have had influence in historical events. So this was the perfect marriage of what could have been, tied into a Star Trek spin-off show.
Sounds fun. So in terms of design, there's not much I don't like. It does feel like an Earth tech, which has been rusted and corroded over hundreds of years in space, which I think looks great. So I can definitely see this design being used in our future and all different variants. I mean, it can do a lot of cool stuff. Yeah, I wish we'd see more of the interior. What sort of controls predate the Enterprise NX-01 and still look like they're from our future? And if I'm going to be honest, I don't think Starfleet would still have used these DY-100s or variants all the way into TOS. Come on, they're not going to be active 275 years later, no matter how upgradable they are. But it's still cool. Still cool to see, but...
It is cool, and I do like seeing them, so, take that for what it is. I don't really like the reaction that some non-Star Trek fans get upon seeing it, even my kids. Why is there a submarine in space? The show is so cheap. The effects are so bad. Couldn't they design a real spaceship? But I really don't have the time to explain the natural progression of technology that technology takes to them. So it's not really a flaw with the ship per se.
And I think you need to take this as a design as a product of the era and the low budget of the show. I think it still looks like a worthy cargo ship from the 21st century. Come on, looks good.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's just a great progression. It does interest me, however, that the ship can get 20 light years from Earth at sublight speeds in like 271 years, though. The math just doesn't seem to add up there for me. I've never been good at math, so maybe I'm wrong, but however, they could have encountered a small wormhole or other outside influence that we see in Star Trek all the time.
V'Ger did. Why not?
Exactly.
Botany Bay. Yeah.
That could have sped them along, and that's very possible. But just slowly tumbling through space at such... It's kind of strange that they got so far. Although, again, Gary Seven's interventions comes into play here as well, and may explain how the Botany Bay got so far from Earth, because the engines on the regular DY-100s we know would not have been made for that. So because of Gary's alien tech, it was used to enhance the Botany Bay's engines, made it much faster for the era. So that's a very intriguing tie-in and a great point. This, of course, does not rule out, though, that there was some other outside influence that may have helped them along on their way. So
yeah, and I never really considered the 20 light years a problem. I mean, obviously, they found some sort of unexpected gravity well and sort of slingshot. I mean, they got out there, so something must have happened. So I'm fine with it. Makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, guys, thanks as always for taking the time to come and see our little show. Follow us on social media if you can't wait until next week to see us again. We, of course, have the Trekyards.com page, as well as Facebook, Twitter, and there are always past episodes on YouTube. If you just do a search for Trekyards, you'll get a complete list of all of our shows, just in case you need your Trekyards fix. So until next time, I'm Captain Foley.
And I'm Commander Cockings.
And we'll see you in the future, guys. But watch out for World War III. It's coming. Tell me.
Guys.